When I was a kid, my friend and I used to play a game called Mystery Drink. We'd take turns throwing things in a blender and creating our own disgustingly unique concoction, and then we'd hand it to each other to drink. Creating a step family can feel a lot like that. And if you're one of many couples attempting to blend two sets of kids from prior relationships, you know you're working with a whole lot of additional mystery drink ingredients. There's like additional layers of complexity that you really do need to anticipate and talk through ahead of time if it's going to be as successful as possible. So that's what I want to talk about today. This topic was kindly requested by one of you. So let's talk about 12 important questions and topics for couples to discuss before getting to the point of blending families. So number one, parenting styles. How do each of you approach parenting your children, right? Because you're each parents already by the time you've come together. What's your take on things like correcting behavior, discipline, consequences? What are your views on rules and boundaries? It's important to have a sense of your parenting styles, where they align, as well as the places they might differ ahead of time to just help ensure as much consistency as possible when you do bring your families together. That's not to say that one of you has to force the other to your way of thinking. In fact, I don't recommend you try and do that, but many couples just sort of consider this something that is common sense. Like, of course, my partner and I have similar viewpoints on this. Or they assume that it's something that will just kind of naturally come together once you're all physically together. And that's often not the case. So I really do recommend taking the time to think through, first of all, your own approach to parenting your kids, and then as clearly as you can, communicate that to your partner and vice versa. Number two is your relationships with your ex-partners. So how are you going to handle communication and co-parenting with your exes once you bring your stepfamily together? This goes for both your general style of communication, like what is the nature of your co-parenting relationship, but also the more practical logistical pieces. So how are you going to do communication? Are there going to be set hours that you will take communications from your co-parent? Are there going to be times that you'd like in your household for it to be, with the exception of emergencies, off limits co-parent communication to protect your time in your household together? Are you going to use phone, text, email, or are you going to opt to use a third-party tool like Our Family Wizard? And again, that can differ widely. So it's not a given that each of you are going to use the same kinds of tools to co-parent. It's not uncommon at all for within one step couple for there to be very different, sometimes dramatically different co-parenting relationships with each partner's ex co-parent. So just knowing what your particular piece of that is going to look like and then communicating it as clearly as possible to your partner so that everyone is going in with as much advanced knowledge as possible, so that you're going in eyes wide open and you can manage your expectations accordingly. Children's feelings. How do each set of kids feel about the prospect of blending families? It's essential to involve them in discussions. And what I often will tell people is that it's not like a one and done sit down where you're delivering an update, like we're going to be creating a step family. It's much more effective if you can start seeding that conversation early and then revisiting it periodically. So the headline message here is that for many reasons, the process of blending two families together is not one to rush. It often takes much longer than maybe a couple would like it to, but it also really is one of those things where you reap the benefits of slow rolling the process. Not to slow it down unnecessarily, but just to really give yourself the chance to engage with each sets of kids and with each other in these really often juicy topics of conversation. What many step couples find is that even when they've spent a lot of time thinking individually and maybe even talking with one another about some of these topics, once you get to the point of, okay, we're talking timeline as far as blending our families, that can unearth new pieces of the conversation. So just giving yourselves ample time to dig into those conversations, and then for sure giving the kids ample time to absorb the impact of even thinking about blending families. It just takes a lot more time maybe than you might think. Household dynamics. What will the living arrangements be? Is everyone going to be living together? On what schedule? Sometimes when families come together and form a step family, it involves a change on either end with the co-parenting schedule, but not always. Sometimes step couples will work it so that all of the kids are in the house on the same schedule and then at the other parents' houses on the same schedule, but it doesn't always work out that way. And so oftentimes couples will find that when they're really putting dates down on the calendar, they see that the schedule suddenly looks much more complex than usual. So that can then give rise to conversations about not just the emotional dynamics in the house, but like logistically coming and going, keeping the timetables of everyone in the family moving in and out of the house. That is something that's really worth talking about ahead of time. Approaches to parenting in blended families, by the way, can range everywhere from taking a really separate approach. So, different rules for each sets of kids. I'll parent mine, you parent yours. It can range from that all the way to full integration. We are one household, everyone lives by the same rules, we have the same expectations, and everyone will more or less be parented in the same way. Those are two very different ends of the spectrum. And so it's worth coming together to just start stimulating conversation about this early and again, often. Often step couples will find that they have an initial discussion about this. And then maybe once they've had some time to reflect or do a little bit of reading or talking with people that they trust, they might have new opinions on it, like a new take or a new set of questions about household dynamics. And so then they come together with the new insights that they have. By the way, if you're looking for a solid resource to help you navigate each step of this process, stay with me to the end. I'm going to be sharing my number one book recommendation with you, in particular for couples that are looking to blend two sets of kids. Next is legal considerations. Have you considered arrangements like custody agreements, wills, and estate planning to make sure everyone in your family's interests are protected? Are there specific questions or fears that come up? This is a big one as you and your partner are talking about getting to the point of blending your families. What comes up? Like, where do you feel it in your body? Are there certain topics that just make you tense up, or that are you find you're losing sleep over, or that's occupying a lot of headspace, like the what ifs and worries? Make sure that you've taken the time to voice those out loud to your partner. And it doesn't always have to be the kind of conversation where you're fixing it. I mean, many times there are legal solutions to some of the worries that come up, but not always, and not always right away. And so it can be a really fruitful relationship and intimacy building vehicle for you and your partner to be able to just name out loud, like, hey, I'm freaked out about, like, what if something should happen to one of us? What's that gonna mean for dot dot dot? And then being able to lovingly and openly engaging in conversation where you're voicing your own worries and you're holding space for your partners, that can be a really nice jumping off point to eventually finding a solution. Closely related to many legal concerns, financial planning. How will you handle finances, expenses related to the kids, household bills, unexpected financial demands that come up, proactive savings for the future? How are you going to approach all of that once everyone comes together? And again, much like with legal concerns, transparency about your finances, where you're coming from, where you want to go, and how you plan to get there together will really take you far. Cultural and religious differences. Do you have different backgrounds that you're going to be bringing into the relationship and into your new family, any that might affect the lives of the kids in that household, new questions maybe that come up as a result of this. How will you integrate these aspects into your blended family life, if at all? How about the kids? Depending on the developmental phases of your kids, they might have different cultural and religious identities than you. How are you going to navigate all of that as a family? Coming together around boundaries and privacy is a really important one for step couples to talk about ahead of time. How are you going to balance individual privacy that everyone is entitled to with family togetherness time? Are you going to have, for example, certain expectations around how much time everyone can spend in their corner of the house, like on their bed, door closed in their own room versus downtime maybe in the evening together? Is there going to be any kind of expectation around that? What sort of culture do you want to build in your step family? Discussing things like this is seems like not urgent. Seems like a we'll cross that bridge when we get to it kind of thing. But what I've often found is that boundaries is one of those topics that just touches so many other areas. We've already covered several of them here. And so being able to open up that dialogue with your partner early on can be really, really helpful. How about quality time? How will you ensure that each child receives the individual attention that they need and feel valued for their place in the family? Sometimes step couples will start by maybe outlining a loose schedule, like, okay, once a month, we're each going to make a special plan with each individual kid of ours. And then from there, you can also come up with ideas like, how are we going to make sure that each step parent has time with their step kids? That can give rise to kind of more complex conversations around activities, making time to support what each kid is interested in and any expectations you have for how the rest of the family will be involved in that. Conflict resolution. How are you going to handle conflicts that will arise between family members? This could include as well conflict between the two of you. So when disagreements come up between the two of you, as they inevitably will, how do you want to approach this? It's worth discussing as well while you're at it, how you're going to decide which pieces of disagreements are best reserved for private, uninterrupted time just between the two of you versus which pieces might be appropriate or even helpful to talk out in front of the kids. Oftentimes, disagreements present us with multiple layers of opportunity, right? There's the actual content, like it might be helpful to get the kids' input on a particular question or point of disagreement, but also depending on the kids' ages, you're modeling for them what healthy conflict resolution can look like. So, always bearing in mind those two different levels, it's not uncommon for kids in a step family to have had a front row seat to maybe some unproductive or unhealthy conflict resolution between their parents. And so, that is one place where being a member of a step family, being a kid in a step family can actually be a real opportunity, is getting to see two people who are coming together and making a conscious effort to do conflict well. That's worth thinking about ahead of time too. How about long-term goals? So taking some time as a couple to think through, like, where do you want to go as a blended family? Obviously, you can't force relationships. You can't force every member of your step family to have a particular outcome just because you want it to be so. But you can do some really nice dreaming and future, like vision casting between the two of you for what you'd like. Do you imagine your family um, going on trips together so that even when people grow older or maybe even leave home, they still want to come back together around certain special occasions and holidays? Is that something that's important to you? Or do you envision your all the kids in the family maintaining their own relationships with one another, step siblings, independent of you as they get older? And then working backwards from whatever long-term goals you might have between the two of you, what can you start doing as you're bringing this family together to help plant the seeds for that to become a reality. Again, we can't force it to happen, but you can really work backwards and almost reverse engineer, like, how can we do some culture building in this step family to make that a stronger possibility down the line. And finally, your support network. Who are the people you can trust? So, individually and as a couple and as a family, to come alongside you and support you as you're navigating this next stage of life. It can be daunting to bring together a step family. And so, taking the time as a step couple to think about what are the kinds of support that we think we might need. Are we open to seeking therapy or coaching if we need it to help ease challenges, strengthen bonds as we come together as a blended family? And so, as promised, I want to leave you with my number one resource recommendation for couples in this stage of planning. When you're thinking, okay, we know that we want to blend our families. We just have no idea when that's going to happen, how it should happen, the different order of all these different topics, right? These are got a lot of things to be thinking about now. This resource can help you do it in a more intentional way. It's the Stepfamily Handbook, and it's written by Karen Bonnell and Dr. Patricia Papernow. I've linked it in the description box below. I highly recommend it. Their kind of byline is from dating to getting serious to forming a blended family. This book is going to walk you through many of the essential topics and questions that we've touched on here today, but just in much greater depth. And it'll provide you some really practical starting points to talk through these issues as a couple. So if you're tuning into the replay, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment. Let us know which piece of this conversation stood out to you. If you are a member of a couple who is getting ready to blend your families together, what's on your mind? What are the questions that you have? And if you've already brought your families together, what do you wish you knew, or what was helpful to you in that process? Go ahead and drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, I want to invite you to check out the resources listed in the description box so you can start today. Start plugging into the support that you need for step family success.